Hey guys, so today we are continuing with the second Crusade series by Kings and Generals, and this is part 3 of that series. If you want to watch the original video by Kings and Generals without my yapping, the link to his video is down in the description down below. And if you want to help support my channel, feel free to either like, comment, subscribe, and maybe consider becoming a Patreon or YouTube member. It would really help me out a lot, and I appreciate it. Now, with that said, and now without any further ado, let's get to it, shall we? Let us watch The Second Crusade, Part 3 by Kings and Generals.
The dramatic showdown at Hab between the Latins and Ilghazi had a major impact on the northern lands of the Outremer. The survival of Antioch's principality and stabilization of the Syrian frontier came at a great cost to the Crusader states. King Baldwin Labor knew that the only way to secure the principality was to take charge of Antioch until Bohemond II came of age. In Labor's absence, power in the city was held by its patriarch Bernard of Valence. Additionally, Baldwin honoured his agreement with Joscelin of Courtenay by installing him as the Count of Edessa, which, together with sending him additional troops, allowed the Latins to stabilise the situation in Edessan territory as well. However, the damage of the 1119 campaign was much more visible in Antiochian territory. Alongside all the Norman elite that had built the de Hauteville domain in Antioch, Baldwin needed to strengthen its frontier by allowing his Jerusalem knights to integrate with them in the lands of northern Syria by giving lands and titles in the region. Oftentimes, this was done by encouraging Baldwin's knights to marry the widows of Antiochian knights who had fallen at Agères-en-Genlis. This policy showcased Antioch's declining power in the Middle East and further dependence on Jerusalem's overlordship.
That is literally what I said last episode. Antioch got clapped so hard that they basically are powerless. They have no army. When Antioch was when these Crusader states were first formed, Antioch and Jerusalem were like the big two, I felt, in terms of status and prestige and power. But man, Antioch fell hard, dude. They were completely basically reliant on Jerusalem as a vassal. I'm like, dang, dude. They peaked with Bohemond the first, you know? And, again, it's interesting to see. I thought, for a second there, Baldwin was going to try to integrate all of this into, one giant kingdom. I mean, granted, I know the logistics of doing that probably not realistically gonna happen, wouldn't, but a part of me was like, I mean, you're already kind of in charge of everything, so I don't know. I'm wondering if they would have been, actually, I'm kind of wondering if it would have been good. Let's just assume, right? Jerusalem, this one in the center, Antioch, Edessa, just all formed into one giant, kingdom, if that would have helped, the manpower and stuff. I don't know. A part of me is thinking that, what if everyone just combined into one power, and if that could have helped? I don't know. Like I said, there's probably a bunch of million things why that wouldn't happen, but a part of me, my mind went there as, I guess, a historical what if.
A far cry from the times of Bohemond I and Tancred. Ultimately, the Battle of Hab would not be the last time that the power of the Latins in Syria would be put to the test. In the aftermath of the Battle of Hab and the dramatic campaign of 1119, tensions in northern Syria remained at an all-time high. The Archduke Atabeg Ilghazi was not done fighting the Franks and demanded a rematch. By the next year, he had renewed his feud with Antioch and Edessa. The Archduke split his forces in half, delegating his governor of Athareb, Bulak, to raid Antiochian territory, while the main force would besiege the city of Edessa. However, the Latins had already been made aware of Ilghazi's intentions. Consequently, Antioch's governor, Patriarch Bernard of Valence, and Count of Edessa, Joscelin of Courtenay, declined to meet Ilghazi in open battle, opting instead to disrupt his main supply line. Since the areas of northern Syria had already been devastated, Muslim armies had no potential loot and plunder, diminishing the enthusiasm of Ilghazi's men. Moreover,
Alright, I'm loving this smart strategy. They're depriving him of gaining more victories, so the morale breaks, and since he's already kind of ruined the territories, there's no plunder, so just destroy him through morale and supply. Okay, that's a great new strategy to take, especially for these weakened areas, so that's good.
The news of Baldwin II returning with Jerusalem's army only further damaged Artikid morale. Having nothing to fight for resulted in Turkoman warriors deserting Ilghazi's force en masse. Reluctant, Ilghazi signed a truce with King Baldwin that was meant to last for 1 year. Thus, after 2 years of struggle, both sides were relieved from fighting one another and could finally divert their attention in different directions.
You were reborn. Please.
After securing the northern frontier, Baldwin II could put his efforts into solidifying his realm. Ever since the times of the First Crusade and the conquest of Jerusalem in 1099, there had been no single official law or set of rules in his kingdom except the one borrowed from feudal Europe. The Latins quickly found out that in order for the Crusader states to survive, they needed better organized social structures that could withstand their surrounding neighbors. On the 16th of January 1120, Baldwin II, together with Jerusalem's Patriarch Gormor, gathered most of the secular and clerical figures in the kingdom to the town of Nablus in order to discuss and resolve all internal affairs. This event, also known as the Council of Nablus, was the first Crusader convocation assembled in the Holy Land that sanctioned a set of 25 laws, rights for the clergy, and even social norms acknowledged by the Latins in the Outremer. It resolved the matters of investiture between the church and the state by clearly setting boundaries between them. Clerical figures like priests, bishops, and patriarchs were banned from military affairs and were only allowed to defend the Christian communities and spiritually support crusading armies. During the discussion, laws were passed to prevent Christians from integrating into the surrounding Muslim environment and adopting Muslim lifestyles by prohibiting marriage between different faiths. In addition, the new laws also presented a set of punishments for crimes like oath-breaking, adultery, bigamy, and other sins sometimes common among crusaders. But the most
Okay, this is smart. I'm liking the way that, yeah, they realize that. I mean, that was shocking to hear that they hadn't created any laws or structures, but again, they've been fighting so much and worrying about stuff like that. But I think definitely trying to create basically a structure and, a society and whatnot, that's a good approach to take to solidify yourself in your territory and, your kingdom, which, your kingdom kind of needs like laws and stuff and order. And so overall, yeah, I was kind of wondering, what about like the locals? Like, apparently there are like, Muslim people there, and at least I'm getting the impression that there is a tolerance of fate, because mentioning, well, yeah, like no marrying across faith or whatnot, so. Okay, yeah, I was like wondering, what about the locals, like, of the area, but, or like the natives rather. So that's kind of something I was wondering about, so they kind of addressed it.
most important matter discussed at the Council of Nablus was the official acknowledgement of the military orders by the Kingdom of Jerusalem. The first of them were the Knights of Hospitalis. The Knights Hospitaller started as a group of Italian merchants of Amalfi, who were led by a man named Gerard from the same city. Together they travelled to the Holy Land back in the 11th century, and with the permission of the Fatimids, who ruled the region at the time, they established a hospital under the name of St. John the Almsgiver. Their main objective was to provide aid and protection for pilgrims eager to visit the holy sites. Their activity was halted by the Seljuk takeover of Jerusalem. During the First Crusade, and later creation of the Kingdom of Jerusalem, the Hospitallers proved themselves very useful in aiding the Latins, providing care for the initially all Italian pilgrims and aiding the kings of Jerusalem in battles against the Seljuks and Fatimids. Their actions were rewarded by Pope Paschal II, who officially acknowledged the Hospitallers Regula in 1113. However, as the fighting between the Christians and the Muslims intensified, pilgrim routes were gradually more endangered by the Fatimid raiding parties or local Muslim bandits. When Master Gerard passed away around 1118 or 1120, his successor, Master Raymond de Puy, reformed and restructured the order and extended its actions beyond hospital work. Marked by a white cross on a black tunic, the Hospitallers started to fight the local banditry, and even served in open military campaigns under the King of Jerusalem.
Yeah, that's really cool, because I've heard of different Knights Orders, and the Hospital is one of the ones I've heard about. I've never really looked too much into the Knight Orders and stuff, even though I am aware. I've heard, their names mentioned, so, and the Hospitals are one of the most frequently mentioned, so I'm finally happy to have an origin story and what exactly they do. So, alright, that's really cool, though. That's a really cool group right there.
At Nablus, their actions were officially acknowledged by the entire kingdom, allowing them to expand their operations to the entire Outremer. The rebranding of the Knights Hospitaller was heavily influenced by the beginning of another equally famous order, the Templars.
Yes.
The Knights
Hospitals, but the Templars are the ones I've heard the most about. Especially in media, art and images. The Templar Knights are always the forefront of medieval knights and of knight orders rather. So I was waiting, they have to be mentioned, and I'm happy he has mentioned them now.
Templar were founded by a French knight of Champagne, Hugh de Payens, who in 1118 managed to convince King Baldwin II to set up a new military quarter in one of the wings of the royal palace located at the former Al-Aqsa Mosque. Filled by his knightly companions, they formed a special order, vowing to actively defend the Christian pilgrims along the way to Jerusalem. The Templars
Yes, so the Templars not only accepted all knights, no matter the status, but also sergeants from the Latin urban dwellers and clerics. Devotion to the cause was the main requirement. Heck yeah, you gotta lock in, dudes.
bore a red cross on their tunics, with knights and clerics wearing a white tunic, whereas the sergeants wore a black one. All brothers followed Saint Benedictine's rule of monastic Christian asceticism. With the Council of Nablus settled, the King of Jerusalem granted the Knights Templar his full support, allowing them to have their own outposts, land, and independent organization from the crown, in exchange for providing a disciplined military force and sharing the burden of garrisoning several border castles. As the various knightly orders of the Levant grew in numbers, their support would play a key role in the future of the Latin states in the Levant. The only man opposing the Nablus Council was Pont of Tripoli. The Count was furious at Baldwin for claiming Antioch for himself, and grew ever more fearful that Jerusalem might come to dominate over all the Outremer states. In an act of protest, he forbade any Tripolitan noble or religious figures from his domains to attend the council, which only strained his relations with the King of Jerusalem. Later on, in 1122, Pont even went as far as to rebel against Labor. However, as
Oh my gosh. Okay, I was wondering, things are going to... They're a bit too unified as of right now in this series. Where's the usual Crusaders fighting each other? I'm finally... It took about 3 episodes for it to begin, but, you know, that's going to be a new record for the Crusades. For the Crusaders, they're usually not that stable for that long. I'm joking around, but... Yeah, Pawn, whatever. Yeah, Jerusalem's already the main guy, dude. He's probably, not fully aware, apparently. But yeah, Jerusalem basically is the main Crusader state. They already basically had to single-handedly save Antioch. They're putting who's in charge of Edessa, I would say in practice, they basically are the ruler. Baldwin is the main man in charge of all the states. At least, in some degree, I feel like you can argue he already is, so I don't know. Yeah.
Baldwin rallied his army with the Holy Cross and approached Tripoli itself, Paul gave up and reconciled with the king.
Had to put him down. See what I mean? Like, he basically is an all but name, like already in charge of everyone. So, yeah.
Meanwhile, on the Muslim side, Ilghazi embarked on a military campaign into Georgia in 1121. The Artukid Atabeg accepted an invitation from the Emirate of Tiflis, located in modern-day Tbilisi. In recent years, the emirate had become increasingly threatened by the burgeoning power of the Bagrationi dynasty.
With loop earplugs, you can enjoy any.
Ilghazi was soundly defeated by the Georgians at the
Oh, wow. Okay. Good on you, Georgia. Check out our detailed okay.
Battle of Didgori, and was forced to retreat back to Mardin, with his manpower resources severely depleted. Further bad news for Ilghazi soon followed, as his own son, Suleiman, who governed his territories of Aleppo, revolted against his father. In order to stabilize his borders with the Franks while he dealt with this internal crisis, he ceded the fortresses of Athareb and Sardana back to the Latins, to which Baldwin II gladly obliged.
Dang, dude, Ilghazi, you started so well, but you're like on your decline now.
Ghazi's previous fruits of conquest were now again in the hands of the Crusader states. The civil war and the loss of bordering castles proved to be a heavy blow for the Artukids. Tired of trying to keep a lid on internal divisions, Ilghazi gradually delegated parts of his domains into the hands of his relatives, only further decentralizing his state. Attempting to retake Sardana, he assembled his army and marched west to confront Baldwin once more. However, as the two sides were approaching an upcoming engagement, Ilghazi died of apoplexy, forcing the Muslim army to withdraw. Once
Dude, Ilghazi fell off hard. At first, he started so promisingly, and not to say his earlier victories don't matter, they obviously do, but like as soon as like after that encounter with Baldwin, like he just went on a decline spiral, and just failed and died. Wow, man. Very anticlimactic for such a promising start, eh? I love going into these videos blind, not knowing what's happening, because while it does make me incredibly ignorant and not aware of what the heck's happening, I really enjoy it because it's fun for me for all these plot twists to happen to me, because it's like I'm watching a TV show. And like everyone can die, like you don't know what the heck is gonna happen. I find that like a funner way to learn history. That's why I love doing this channel, man. I get like a thrill out of this stuff, you know?
a powerful warlord willing to challenge all his neighbors, Ilghazi died as a broken man, his empire fading from his eyes. Lebor was relieved by how things turned out, but he had little time for celebrations as he had to turn his focus on Transjordan in order to repel a Toghtecan invasion, after which he could finally return to Jerusalem. Ever since the Battle of Ager-Saint-Genis in 1119, King Baldwin II Lebor had sought military aid from all corners of Catholic Europe. Much to his disappointment, most European leaders like Pope Calixtus II and Holy Roman Emperor Henry V were embroiled in the investiture controversy, resulting in no aid for the Crusader states. The only candidate interested in aiding the crusading cause proved to be the maritime Republic of Venice. Familiar with trade in the Levant, the Republic desired more trading posts in the region from which it could profit. When Baldwin...
Yeah, as you expect from Geneva and Venice, like, these guys are very driven by profit. Like, it makes sense considering that they're kind of maritime powers, and were very, I feel like Venice and Genoa had their peaks in the medieval era. Like, I feel like every time we touch the medieval era, you always see the Genoese and the Venetians around, because this is like the era where they were like superpowers or went up to there because of their overseas trading and stuff. So again, and yeah, the Crusaders states seem to be, I've heard, I mentioned this in the first part, but I heard that they were reliant on, like, supplies from overseas and stuff. So, They were not, at least the impression I got, they were not completely self-sustaining. Again, that's just random stuff. I could be completely wrong, by the way. But yeah, Antioch basically calling for as much aid as they can, because again, their military strength basically is non-existent now. What sets off the Crusade? Because we still haven't even gotten to the Crusade itself. Like, when's the point that the Pope's like, we need to rally now? You know what I mean? Like, I'm wondering what the catalyst is for that event.
Emissaries approached the Venetian Doge, Domenico Michiel, with promises to provide the most serene republic with just that. The latter proved willing to cooperate. Meanwhile, the Venetians had also received a letter from Calixtus II encouraging the Republic to go on crusade. The Pope's relations with the German Emperor were, by that point, gradually improving, and the Bishop of Rome needed to focus Europe's attention somewhere else. Just like in 1095, the Holy Land seemed to be the perfect solution. With papal blessing, a crusade was announced in 1122, with the aim of supporting Jerusalem.
Wow, that happened faster than I expected. I thought like a bigger disaster was gonna strike like in an episode or two, then a crusade will happen. No, it just happened like that. Then Kings and Generals, thank you. Thanks for getting there. During their journey, the Crusaders were relatively reassured about their properties as the church announced protection and disposition of all knights and pilgrims' assets, laying the groundwork for the future banking system, Sorry, my dog was barking a lot in the background. But let me get... so the Crusade was called as a distraction since the investiture issue. So basically a convenient distraction.
Domenico Michiel, with promises to provide the most serene republic with just that. The latter proved willing to cooperate.
Profit.
Meanwhile, the Venetians had also received a letter from Calixtus II encouraging the Republic to go on crusade. The Pope's relations with the German Emperor were, by that point, gradually improving, and the Bishop of Rome needed to focus Europe's attention somewhere else. Just like in 1095, the Holy Land seemed to be the perfect solution.
Okay, smart. Let's all focus on something. Aside from this very complex religious matter, with another religious matter, the Holy Land, you know?
With papal blessing, a crusade was announced in 1122, with the aim of supporting Jerusalem in its darkest hour. Word was quickly spread across Europe, and soon knights and pilgrims from France, Germany, Bohemia, and Italy gathered near Venice. With the final preparations completed on the 8th of August 1122, the Crusaders and Venetians set sail from the Venetian lagoon. The number of ships in the historical sources varies from 72 to 120, but it is safe to say that the Crusaders numbered around 100 vessels with a maximum of 15,000 men on board. Their voyage proved to be more problematic than previously expected, as while the Venetians were sailing around...
It always is. Like, I seldom hear of a crusade that just goes smoothly without a hitch, you know? There's always something with these crusades, dude.
The Adriatic coast, they were tempted to renew their quarrel with the Byzantine Emperor John Comnenus over their unfavourable trade rights with the Greeks. Wanting to settle their score with the Eastern Romans, the Venetian fleet attacked a strategic fortress on the island.
Oh my gosh. If I had a nickel for every time, you know, instead of going to the Holy Land, they attacked the Roman Empire, I would have 2 nickels right now. Which isn't a lot, but it's funny that it's happened twice. We need to go to the Holy Land, but first, let us attack Rome. Never change, Latin Europe, never change.
But much to the Doge's dismay, the siege dragged on for over a year, and the other European crusaders became restless about sailing to Jerusalem. Finally, the pilgrims' voices were heard, as a messenger from Jerusalem urged the Venetians to abandon the siege of Corfu in favour of reaching the Holy Land, as the recent events unfolding in the Outremer required the Crusaders' immediate attention. Ilghazi's death in 1122 had emboldened Josselin to raid Aleppo territory and attempt to secure a strategic crossing of the Euphrates at Balis. Like during his previous fights with the Bedouins at Transjordan, he planned for a swift action with only 100 men. Confident in Ilghazi's realm decentralization, the Count rushed his force inside enemy territory, neglecting the remaining Artikid Turkoman force. Much to Josselin's surprise, his force was ambushed and defeated by the Turkomans, headed by Ilghazi's nephew, Nur ad-Dawla Belik Ghazi, who killed most of the Latin knights, all except Josselin and Galeron of Le Puissé, Lord of Birjak. Elated by his easy victory, Belik decided to keep his hostage, and
Dang. Well, the county of Odessa is now, like, completely without a leader, I guess? Wow, he really ran to that.
imprisoned him at the remote Karpurt fortress in southern Armenia.
My gosh.
Hearing the news of Josselin's troubles, Baldwin II decided to take charge of the county's overlordship and initiate a rescue mission, gathering a few hundred knights, sergeants and Turcopoles for the action. By quickly reaching Edessa, Lebor re-established order in the county. Afterwards, the king rushed to the place of Josselin's captivity. However, Baldwin's raid proved to be as short-sighted as Josselin's. As he tried to cross the Euphrates River at Gaga, he was ambushed and captured by Belik and thrown in.
Wow. Okay, that caught me off guard. Just like that, Baldwin has been captured. Dang, they both made the exact same mistake, too. Like, charging in, not being fully prepared, and just getting sneaked attacked. Dang, dude, that's wild. Dude, Baldwin, you're falling off. What happened, dude? Why is everyone starting to fall off in this series? Like, first Antioch, powerful, fell off. You know, then Ilghazi started off really well, fell off. Now Baldwin, who at this point had come across as the main character of this series, just gets captured so anticlimactically. Like, dang, dude, what happened, Baldwin? Like, this is not what I expected from you.
Into the same prison as Josselin. The situation turned out to be dire for the King of Jerusalem. The loss of Josselin could only be felt as a loss of the Count's personal prestige, but a king's captivity would put the entire Kingdom of Jerusalem, including all Latin states, to the test.
Oh no.
Meanwhile,
yeah, his hasty action essentially has destabilized a lot, because Baldwin was the main guy of the Crusader states. He's the guy everyone was calling for help. He was basically like the leader of all of them. You know, maybe not in full name, but in practice I felt like he was. So we're gonna rely on pawns now? Is he gonna have to step up and be the leader that we all need? Like, man. Actually, I should joke around. Maybe for all I know, pawns might actually do that. But dang, like, at this point, what more? You know what I mean? What else can we do? Yeah, that was so anticlimactic. Like I said, I'm a little disappointed in Baldwin. I expected way more from him.
The end of May 1123, the Venetians and the rest of the Crusaders had finally sailed to Acre. After the initial lavish celebration in Jerusalem, the Latin nobility entered into a heavy debate on where to direct the Venetian fleet. Only Tyre and Ashkelon remained in Muslim hands from the remaining strongholds and harbours in the Outremer. The Latin barons from Judea favoured an offensive on Ashkelon, while the barons of Galilee opted for the latter. Ultimately, the deciding voice came from the Venetians, who preferred to sail upon Tyre, mainly because of the better harbour conditions. During the discussions, Domenico Michiel demanded terms for their service. Realizing that the opportunity could not wait until Baldwin's return from captivity, Constable William and the newly appointed Patriarch Wamund reluctantly agreed. They signed a treaty, also known as Pactum Wamundi, which stated that in exchange for Venice's naval and military assistance in the Holy Land, the Kingdom of Jerusalem would allow Venetian merchants to settle one street in each major harbour and city in the Kingdom of Jerusalem, except the Holy City itself, and enjoy certain privileges, like an exemption from taxation, The Republican traders could use their own coin weight measures and standards during the transactions, and were guaranteed rights to have a separate church, market, bath, mill, and oven in every city. Furthermore, upon the capture of Tyre, Ashkelon and the rest of the harbours, 1/3 of the city, and
Oh my, okay, so in Acre, 25% of the city went to the Venetians, who were granted freedom equal to that in Venice. Jerusalem's decision to let them monopolize the pilgrimage route deepened Crusader dependence on the Republic with disastrous results. Dude, yeah, I feel like Baldwin needed to be there to talk with these guys, right? Like, I feel like Baldwin not being there has created a weird effect to where now Venice can... I mean, who knows, maybe Baldwin might have agreed to all this too, I don't know, but I feel like this is a really important decision that he should have been around for, but unfortunately he was, you know, captured. So now Venice is just securing themselves a deal. Dang, man.
1/3 of the city's surroundings were to be handed to the Venetians. This agreement was very favourable to the Venetians, for it gave them the lion's share in the lucrative trade routes of the Levant.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Venice basically secured themselves like a great deal. They hustled right now, you know what I mean? At the expense of everyone, especially later on. So, I mean, good on Venice, by the way. Like, hey man, I respect the hustle of the Venetians, by the way.
As the talks ended, the Crusaders and the Venetians approached Tyre and began the siege on the 15th of February 1124. Luck was on the Crusaders' side, for the city was in turmoil due to strained relations between Fatimid Egypt and the Emirate of Damascus. Previously, Tyre was governed by Toghtekin's governor Masud, and the city still maintained prayers for the Fatimid Caliph, which, according to Muslim custom, meant that formally the city still belonged to the Fatimids. The Egyptian vizier Al-Afdal was hesitant to change this delicate political balance, wanting to maintain good relations with both the Fatimids and the Atabeg of Damascus. However, the situation changed rapidly after his assassination in 1121 by his own Caliph Al-Amir.
Oh no.
After this, the Fatimid Caliph sent a fleet to Tyre, which managed to lure out Masud and bring him back to Egypt. After this successful kidnapping, Masud was forced to hand the city over to the Fatimids, after which he was allowed to return to Toghtekin. When the Damascene warlord realized he had been outsmarted and nothing could be done, he decided to allow the Fatimids to keep
Dang, genius play from the Fatimids, holy crap.
the city, probably out of fear of breaking the alliance. He remained with his forces behind Jordan, awaiting any opportunity to retake the city. This infighting amongst the Muslims was very beneficial for the Franks. Without Al-Amir and Toghtekin coordinating their efforts, the Franks could easily defend their positions against any Fatimid or Damascene reinforcements. However, despite all these factors, their opponents still couldn't be underestimated. The defenders of Tyre could still rely on resupply and reinforcements from the sea, as long as the Fatimids possessed a strong navy in the region. Moreover, the Crusaders were pressured even further due to Al-Amir's army arriving from the south. The Caliph ordered the building of as many ships as possible, amounting to his fleet of over 70 galleys. He intended to release...
Man, so I think of the first siege of Tyre from like Alexander the Great, and how insane. That's actually my favorite siege of all time, by the way. I love the fact that Alexander had the vision and the audacity to look at this island and be like, what if it wasn't an island anymore, you know? But yeah, a big problem he faced was the navy issue, right? But fortunately, since Alexander's plot armor kicked in, you know, they managed to get around that. But here, I'm just wondering how the Crusaders are gonna pull it off, like, you know, if they can. I mean, Venice is known for its maritime power, though. Like, their navy and fleet, that's kind of what they're mainly known for, so surely they could help. They could use that, right? Depending on how many ships they have. I don't know. I guess we'll see.
Leave the city by striking the Crusader forces from land and sea. By the end of May 1123, the Egyptian army had moved from Ashkelon through Jaffa. Without any hesitation, Constable William hastily mobilized knights, pilgrims, and citizens of Jerusalem, numbering around 7,000 men, to confront the Fatimid threat. Marching with a relic of the Holy Cross, the forces of Jerusalem blocked the Muslim march on Jaffa near Ibilin. When both sides spotted each other near the village of Caco, the Latins blocked the path, providing time for the Venetian sailors to embark on their ships and get out of danger. As the Caliph's forces approached the Christian host, the battle ensued. Despite the numerical superiority of the Fatimids, William's army had higher morale in the presence of the Holy Relic. Encouraged, the Latins pushed forward, and with great ferocity, finally broke through the Fatimid center. Seeing their formation broken, the Muslims fled, leaving their camp and spoils in the hands of the victors. After this, the Crusaders returned to Tyre, celebrating their victory. When the Egyptian fleet learned about the defeat of their land counterpart, the Fatimid admiral decided to return to Ashkelon, denying the Venetians the chance to engage with the Egyptians for a while. When both of his forces returned to Ashkelon, the Caliph decided to change the direction of his army for Jerusalem in order to divert the Crusaders' attention, also dividing Venetian galleys from their Latin suppliers, while his fleet would continue to supply the city.
Oh. Okay, that's an interesting move. Definitely keep their attentions divided. Okay, I see what the Fatimids are doing.
Meanwhile, as the Venetian fleet was resupplying in Cyprus, the Venetian Doge learned that the Fatimid main fleet had sailed again from Ashkelon, aiming to reinforce the Tyre garrison again. The Egyptian ships were slowed down by the increased number of transport ships, causing the fleet to sail slower than was possible. Knowing that such an occasion may not repeat itself for a long time, the Venetian Doge launched a daring assault on the Fatimid galleys. He divided his vessels into two groups, with the stronger ships at the front to lure enemy ships into battle. On a foggy morning, the Fatimid convoy noticed a small Venetian squadron. Counting on an easy victory, the Fatimid fleet broke away from their course and turned to face the approaching Latin ships. But as they advanced upon their enemy, the rest of the Frankish ships gradually moved out of the fog.
Dang. Great move. Holy crap, that's awesome. You can imagine the Fatimids' shock when just all of this comes from the fog. Dang, great. The Venetians, man, definitely taking the opportunity. You can see why the Venetians rose to power in the medieval era and why they became so powerful as a force later on. Dang.
With their number outgrowing the Muslim ships. Soon, panic and chaos spread across the Fatimid fleet. The Venetian ships caught the Egyptian galleys and engaged in fierce deck-to-deck fighting.
Dang.
In the midst of combat, the Venetian sailors captured 4 galleys and 6 transport ships. The most serene Republic's navy carved their way up to the Fatimid flagship, boarded it, and killed the enemy admiral. When the Egyptian sailors heard of the death of their commander, they panicked and fled, sailing back to Ashkelon. The Venetians pursued their foes as far as Al-Arish, then returned north to rejoin the rest of the Latin army.
That's what I was saying. I'm like, yeah, the Fatimids would have to rely on like naval support for Tyre, but I'm like, the Venetians are known for their navy and known for their naval prowess, so I'm glad to see that came into play. Dang, complete domination. Wow. I like that. That was awesome.
William of Tyre, probably exaggerating the outcomes of the battle, stated that over 4,000 corpses of Fatimid sailors were carried out onto the shore, turning the sea red. The naval victory at Jaffa was a turning point in the siege. Now the city was encircled by both land and sea. Moreover, water and rations were starting to dwindle, and the situation inside the city was getting direr with each passing day. Its citizens again decided to send letters to Al-Amir and Toghtekin, desperately pleading for immediate assistance, stating that the city would be forced to surrender if no further provisions were provided. Sadly for Tyre, the Fatimids had just suffered 2 defeats in a row, and the Caliph felt that he was in no position to send any more reinforcements. However, not all was lost for the city of Tyre. Toghtekin was on his way, having marched his army to the aid of the city, probably counting on an easy victory, assuming that both the Latins and Fatimids had sustained heavy losses from the siege.
And little did he know That's not what's happening. Toktekin, I think is gonna, if they defeat him, that's it for Tyre, right? They have no hope of relief. So this is a pretty big battle. I think this will definitely decide a lot for Tyre.
Having mustered a huge army near Damascus, Tughtekin easily crossed Galilee and encamped just 4 miles outside the city walls. The Crusaders, shocked at the speed of the Damascene army, thought the attack was coordinated between the Emir of Damascus and the Fatimid Caliph, so they split their forces into 3 groups. William of Burr, together with Pont of Tripoli, would use all the Latin cavalry in an attempt to stop Tughtekin's advance. The Venetians would sail around Tyre, expecting the next assault from the Fatimid fleet, while the 3rd group would guard the siege engines, preventing the defenders from sallying out of Tyre.
Okay, they don't know what's happening. They think this is a coordinated assault. Little do they know that the Fatimids are basically out of the fight. So I'm wondering if this is a bad thing. This division, that it'll weaken the siege and weaken their forces to create kind of like, you get what I mean? I don't know if this is a good thing. I guess we'll see.
Tughtekin, on the other hand, counted on his element of surprise. When he heard that the crusading force was rushing to meet him in battle, he decided to return home.
Oh, wow.
At the same time, the Venetian fleet, suspecting an attack from an Egyptian fleet, seized the small harbour of Scandalium, only to find that the Egyptian fleet was nowhere to be found.
Okay, there's a lot of like going on right here. Never mind. Tughtekin's just bye. Oh, wow. Okay, never mind.
The only remaining move to be made was by Tyre's defenders, and in a desperate sally, they managed to burn down some of the siege equipment. Undeterred, the Crusaders decided to double their efforts, since it was certain that no help would arrive anytime soon. They sent a letter to Antioch for more engineers, including one Armenian named Havadik, whose skills and expertise allowed the Crusaders to cover their losses and even further intensify catapult and ballista firepower on the city walls. Hearing of the siege's progress, Tughtekin was again called for aid. This time, Tughtekin knew all too well that capitulation was inevitable, and the crusading force was too numerous. Finally, the Emir of Damascus opened negotiations with the Crusaders in the name of Tyre. During the talks, terms of surrender were presented. The city would be handed to the Latins, and in exchange, the Muslim population could leave freely for Damascus with their property intact. This proposal was ill-received by some of the Crusaders, but in a heated discussion, William of Burr managed to convince the rest to agree with the final statement. After the terms were presented to Tughtekin, the Emir of Damascus agreed, and on the 7th of July 1124, the city was finally handed over to the Franks. The Latins also fulfilled their obligations to the Venetians by giving them control of 1/3 of Tyre. As the most serene Republic fleet sailed back to the Venetian lagoon, they also reached a favourable trade agreement with the Byzantines, thus establishing themselves as the main powerhouse of maritime trade in the Eastern Mediterranean.
Dude, Venice, man, they got quite the awesome deal from all this. You kidding me? That's awesome. That these guys showed up and got quite a lot from that. And yeah, overall good on Venice, dude. Like, man, there's a lot of miscommunication and misunderstandings in that entire situation, but hey, they won on all sides. So that's really cool. That was really cool.
The Venetian Crusade marked the beginning of the Crusader kingdom's growing dependence on the Italian Maritime Republic. Thanks to the signed Pactum Warmundi, Venice was allowed to become a main benefactor of the trade in the Levant, which could quickly unfold into political influence, as well as indicating a foreshadowing of the events of the disastrous Fourth Crusade. Still, the Latins managed to achieve a great victory, and with only Ashkelon remaining, almost the entire coastline of the Holy Land belonged to the Franks, which resulted in a drastic shift in the balance of naval power in favour of the Crusader states. This allowed for an increased influx of pilgrims from Europe. Furthermore, the Kingdom of Jerusalem was put to the test, and thanks to King Baldwin's organisation, it managed not only to survive without his presence, but also to expand its territory.
Dang. Alright, at least definitely Baldwin left a good lasting, you know, thing that it could still function even though he's like gone now. So wow, this has taken turns I did not expect. But I guess Venice is now here to stay, so that's pretty cool. Now Venice is gonna seem to be a lead player in all this. So I'm gonna end the video right here, and I'll see you guys tomorrow when we cover the rest, another part of this. Bye everyone.